No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. Another thing I listen to on audiobook, so I will not be able to hold it in my hands, is the third Rebecca Roanhorse book I read over the course of like a month or so. Over the course of the last month or so, I guess. 2 months. I don't know. Whenever the last time I since the last time I did a block of recordings, is Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse. Came out this year, 2020, or came out last year, late last year, 2022. And it is unrelated to the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. It is in a completely different secondary world, from what I understand. One that is like a dark fantasy world that is, I think, original to that book, although I have not read a lot of her other stuff. I think I've only read these three at this point, now that I'm sort of saying that out loud. Um, uh, Kind of a big departure, honestly. Although I did talk about a little bit in the previous video on Fevered Star, that one ended up taking sort of a thriller-y genre elements. This is just a straight up murder mystery set in a secondary world, like a dark fantasy world that is very Christian, which is interesting. Um, it's about two sisters. Celeste is the main character. Marielle is accused of killing a virtue, which are sort of the god, the heaven side of the theology here. She is half virtue and half fallen herself, because these are like races, not just like you know uh, one's aligned with the devil versus one's aligned with God or whatever. Um, they work in this bar together. Her sister isn't singing, and then she's found in a room with a dead virtue. And the basic, machinations are that Celeste sort of is like, my sister's innocent. She's a very innocent person. She would never have done this. She goes to basically the like court to become basically the juror, the devil's advocate for Marielle, which is just repeatedly explained that like no, it's God's justice, so it's like literally just like the the fact that we're having an argue, like having someone argue for you, is like uh, it's kind of pointless, but we keep these structures in place. And then the bulk of the book is Celeste sort of wandering around, sort of looking for clues, for witnesses, for indications of what what could have led somebody to kill this virtue, and who would have motive and stuff like that. This is a weird one, because I don't think the secondary world worked super well for me, and I figured out the murder mystery, like the resolution of it, about halfway through, just sort of independently, which is not a thing I do. I don't. Um, I am significantly more compelled by language and imagination than I am by plot, and so I very rarely even think about what could happen. Um, I will, in retrospect, think about things like once they have been laid out to me, I'll think, oh, okay, so they made that choice for this particular reason, or that it had this particular effect. But I'm very rarely reading going, what's happening next? I'm reading going, huh, why this choice and not a different one, or why this structure and not a different structure? Why this sentence and not a differently phrased sentence? So yeah, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I think it's a fairly predictable murder mystery, um, and weirdly enough, I think that's kind of the thing that worked best for me in my reading of it, at least. Um, at a certain point, I was just like, oh, it's gonna be this, and that's gonna lead to this sort of reckoning or whatever. And I was right, and I was still really compelled. Here's another way to say this. There's a version of this book that ends with the big revelation of the whodunit being resolved. I think that book sucks. I think Roanhorse paced it and structured it well in such a way that once the whodunit is resolved, there's significant character implications that have been sort of being built up in piece by piece throughout the rest of these relationships that Celeste has, especially, um, and that get at compelling questions about. Um, I think I think the thing is, and when I say I don't love the world building, like I don't think they get at compelling questions about the world. I think they get at compelling questions about um, how how can concepts travel between the real world and the world of this fiction. Um, that is to say, I think it's a more of a thematic interest. It's of more thematic interest than it is of aesthetic maybe. And I think it's handled well in those ways. And like that's legit kind of. I don't know. It was a pleasant read. I like immediately gave a copy to my coworker who is much more of a mystery person than me because I was like, and is not really a fantasy science fiction person at all because I was like, I think this might be a really good mystery and I would love to hear your take on it. Not because it's so twisty and turny and impossible to predict. In fact, quite the opposite. And I'm I'm curious about what other people end up taking away from that. But this is a Just Bees book club, so thanks for not watching.